Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now. I'm Hina Gambhir. Today, I want to begin with what Greek philosopher Plato had said. Democracy is a charming form of government, full of variety and disorder, and dispensing a sort of equality to equals and unequals alike. For a democracy to succeed, this intent for equality needs to touch every citizen, and unequal treatment needs to be interpreted as a setback to democracy. Now, viewers, most of you must have seen or heard about an incident that took place at Ranchi Airport last Saturday. On 7th of May, a family of 3 was subjected to gross discrimination and humiliation by private airline Indigo. The passenger carrier, which boasts of being the leader in the domestic segment with around 48% market share. The family of 3 was supposed to travel from Ranchi to Hyderabad. A teenager with special needs was denied boarding by staff of Indigo Airlines at Ranchi Airport. And the manner in which it was done, on the face of it, can be termed rude, arbitrary, and high-handed. Now, in the last 2 days, 2 statements have been issued by Indigo Airlines. The first statement said, and I quote, "In view of the safety of passengers, a specially abled child could not board the flight with his family as he was in a state of panic." Amidst outrage over social media, a more detailed second statement called the incident unfortunate and the airline's decision the best possible under difficult circumstances. Viewers, the airline today offered sincere regrets along with an electric wheelchair for the boy. DGCA is conducting a probe. 3-member team is going to visit Ranchi as well as Hyderabad to collect evidence, and within a week a report is going to be prepared and then action will be taken. Civil Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia has assured action and has said there is zero tolerance towards any such behavior. That's being seen as a warning after this incident came to light. Now, all of this is fine. This issue flags serious need for passenger rights. Remember, in 2017, at Delhi Airport, Indigo staff had beaten up a passenger in full public view. And we broke that story first. It's not the first time that something like this has happened with a passenger with special needs. While the aim is to take Hawaii Chappalwala in Hawaii Jahaz, flying for passengers with special needs still remains a nightmare. An affair that defies democratic tenets of ensuring equality. And that's our focus on Urban Debate tonight. Joining us tonight is Sudha Chandran, who is an actor and a well-known Bharatnatyam dancer. Sudha Chandran lost her leg in an accident, managed to return to acting and dancing with a prosthetic limb. But traveling by air isn't that easy. She herself has been inconvenienced many a times while traveling by air. Viewers, I also have with me someone who was an eyewitness, who posted this entire incident on social media. And it was only after her post that we got to know about what really happened. This prompted the regulator to act and the Civil Aviation Minister to respond. Let's welcome Manisha Gupta, founder and CEO, Startup. Manisha and Sudha, thank you very much, both of you, for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now this evening. We are also joined by Captain Amit Singh, founder, Safety Matters Foundation, Sanat Kaul, former Civil Aviation Joint Secretary, Government of India, and Chairman, International Foundation for Aviation, Aerospace and Drones, Neetu Shukla, former In-Flight Service Director, Kingfisher Airlines. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now. Manisha, I want to begin the discussion with you, because you're the one who can tell us, you can describe for our viewers what exactly had happened on 7th of May at Ranchi Airport.
Sure. Thank you for having me. So that evening, between 7 and 7:45 p.m., the whole scene played out. We were waiting in the terminal and we saw a parent bring in a child who seemed to be a young person living with multiple disabilities on a wheelchair. A short conversation with the father revealed to me that the child had had a distressful drive to the airport because of the heat, and he was just hungry and thirsty, and so he was in discomfort. Now, a child with so many disabilities was expressing his discomfort in ways that may not be similar to how other children express their discomfort, and that actually caught the attention of the Indigo manager. So the child was crying or moaning, which is an expression of communication for children who live with these conditions. But the Indigo manager went up and said, "Look, ma'am, if your child does not start to behave normally, we are not going to board him." And that actually accelerated a whole series of pressures, but finally, by the time it was boarding had opened, we saw how the parents had coaxed and cajoled the child, fed the child, given the child water, and the child was ready to board. But this manager came up and said, "He is unfit. This is unruly behavior. He is in a panic mode. He is unsafe for other passengers." And that was when all the passengers stood up and really rallied around and provided and gave to the manager a whole set of very logical and reasonable arguments, saying, "Look, we don't have any problems with this child traveling with us." It seemed like this was not the first time the child was traveling. The child has traveled multiple times on Indigo, and it has been quite all right. And then there was a delegation of doctors who said, "We are traveling with this child. We will offer unconditional support." But the gentleman over here was absolutely adamant and steadfast. He was not willing to listen to parents who were saying, "Look, we got this. We've traveled with the child. He's fine." And all this while, the child had calmed down. He was perhaps just letting out a few sounds, which are sounds of expression and communication. And at one point of time, he actually was completely quiet and sitting on the wheelchair. And this manager of the airline kept pointing out to this kid who was absolutely terror-stricken, saying, "Look at him, he's panicking." But all we could see was a very quiet child. And so passengers started to say, "Sir, you are panicking, he's not." Despite that, despite our pleas, despite our evidence, despite our request to call the manager to confer with the pilot, this gentleman was clearly not in a mood to listen. He was not in a mood to consult. And finally, the plane boarded, just leaving these three stranded. That's what really happened. And there were at least 30, 40 passengers.
Important details you have given to us, Manisha. I'm just interrupting you there. So you're telling us that the child was absolutely quiet. You saw actually panic, especially in the staff of Indigo Airlines who were handling this entire situation. Sudha Chandran, do you feel discriminated as well each time you fly?
Yeah, this is what in fact, if you remember, it was about 3 or 4 months before when I had taken up this issue, where I had to undergo this ordeal, and it has been happening for quite some time. And that is when I had to raise my voice. And see, this is absolutely inhuman, ruthless. And like you rightly said, Modi ji has said, "Hawai chappal wale ko bhi hawai jahaz mein baithne ka adhikar diya jayega." This is the visionary of our Prime Minister. And what are we Indians, what are we doing? Just because a child is specially challenged, you don't give them the permission to board a flight? This inhuman act cannot be pardoned. Never, ever. And let me tell you, nobody is specially challenged. It's nobody's choice. And don't tell me, what was the manager thinking? What is his attitude towards people? I think immediate action has to be taken against that manager. And I'm so happy that our Civil Aviation Minister, Mr. Scindia ji, even that time he intervened immediately. And even this time he has tweeted. But my only humble request to the government is, let's not put it in words. We need action. This person, the interrogation committee has been set up. And if it found that he is guilty, he should be thrown out of this job. Immediate action has to be taken, because now the people are not going to take it lying low. Like she rightly said, she said it so beautifully that all the passengers requested them. I mean, was that manager so inhuman that he could not see all this? And we're talking about a pandemic where we said we will be better human beings after the COVID. But I'm sorry, these are only words. It is not there in act. It's not there in deeds. We are getting worse day by day. We are becoming barbaric. This is pathetic.
Very important point you have raised, Advait Sudha Chandran. You know, we had a discussion at that time as well in October last year when you also had to face a lot of problems. Captain Amit Singh, these incidents have happened. I broke a story about an Indigo passenger way back in November 2017 who was also in a way thrashed by the ground staff of Indigo at IGI airport. And what happened after that? The attitude, it seems, has not really changed. We just heard the experience of Ms. Sudha Chandran. What changed after that?
It is about the culture prevailing in the organization and what standards you set forth. So it is not only about the manager who's at the scene handling, but it is how he has been trained and what he has seen or he has heard from the top. It always percolates from the top. The philosophy of the organization or the airline is pretty clear: affordable fares, on-time performance, and then comes the passengers. So they cannot compromise with on-time performance is what everybody knows or what has been drilled into. If you look at the regulations are very clear. We have a right to freedom, right to movement as per the Constitution, right to life and personal liberty. Then comes the Act for the Disabled and people with reduced mobility, 2016, from which the DGCA has made regulations. Now, regulations look at facilitating their travel, not hindering their travel. It starts off with no person shall be denied carriage. And secondly, once the person arrives at the airport, it is the job of the airline to facilitate their travel, seamless travel from the airport terminal to the aircraft. Now, there are certain conditions of carriage. If you look at certain conditions of carriage, once you buy a ticket, you obviously sign certain declarations under the conditions of carriage. And for people with disability or reduced mobility, it is incumbent upon the airline to make them aware of these. And the rule is very clear that in case of any refusal to carry, it is upon the airline to give it in writing, the reasons for the refusal. Were they due to the flight safety? Apparently, what we have heard is this child could have been a flight safety hazard. It is unbelievable that a teenager, a disabled person on a wheelchair can be termed as a flight safety hazard. So unless it is a flight safety issue, nobody should be denied carriage. There were assistants, their parents were assistants, there were doctors who could have helped the child in case things went out of control in air, subdued or sedated. So these are the conditions in the acts, in the regulations. And lastly, DGCA has no authority to investigate these things. The card very clearly says there is a grievance system, redressal system, which is that the airline has to have a nodal officer and an appellate authority, which in a specified time will give a report of what happened. If the person is not convinced, then there is another authority, which is the Chief Commissioner of Persons with Disabilities. So DGCA has no authority to investigate. They don't have the expertise, nor are they the right people. If they come out with a report, then civil aviation may take, but it is upon another authority which protects their rights and interests. So we should let the machinery function, not intervene and show that we're doing a good job. Now, it is good that the minister has tweeted, but one must also remember that the Constitution guarantees you something, certain rights under Article 21 and 19. So it is upon the minister and the ministry to make sure that people traveling are aware of these rights. It is all about education. Educate people of their rights. There is a charter of rights which is hidden somewhere in the website, which people don't know. When there is denied carriage or the flight is delayed, passengers are inconvenienced, there are certain rights which they should know, which should be advertised in bold in public spaces, but it is always hidden somewhere. for people to dig up and find. If they don't find, then it is basically take what you get. That is the attitude.
Right. Very important points you have raised, and of course passengers also need to know about their own rights. Mr. Sanat Kaul, Sudha Chandran I think also wanted to come in. Yes, Ms. Chandran, go ahead, make your point.
See, there are, like Captain rightly said, see, we passengers know about our rights, but my point is people on the top level form the rules, but are these rules and regulations taught to the people on the ground level? The ground reality is different. The point is that the top level, top brass have got all the rules and regulations set. But then when we actually go into reality, like when I cross over for a security check, it's a ground reality which I face. And then, you know, you are told ki, nahi, aisa kuch hai nahi, aisa humne kuch padha nahi. So first, I think it's very important to educate the entire system, right from the top to the bottom. They should be aware of how they should treat the passengers. And this is what I said. I had asked for a dignified frisking at the airports or any other public places. Because once the dignity is lost, it's lost forever. Like Captain rightly said, we have a right to freedom of expression and movement. Nobody can deny that. Nobody can deny that.
Like Mr. Sanat Kaul,
I travel.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry. Yep.
Absolutely. Unless, of course, there is a valid reason. What was the reason here is what we are now trying to understand. Mr. Sanat Kaul, what are the rules, according to you, the manager invoked on 7th of May at Ranchi Airport to deny boarding permission to this child, to this teenager with special needs?
Okay, I think it's very unfortunate what happened, and it should not happen. When you ask me for the rules, well, I can only see there are two rules. One is the passenger charter, which definitely provides for all the facilitation for challenge or people like this young man. But the other is what is known as the disruptive passenger. Now, disruptive passenger, he does not definitely fall into this at all. And disruptive passenger is a category which is where they have even, blacklisted certain individuals from traveling in that airline who have created problems earlier. And we've had cases like that earlier. But this does not fall into that category at all. So I don't know on what basis they have made this statement that the other passengers will be disturbed. There was, and under what rule they have made it, and the insensitivity of the local manager is definitely very much there. So that, according to me, the only category under which this case can fall is under the disruptive passenger category, and it does not at all belong in that category. That's the rule I feel
absolutely
has been valid. Yeah.
Neetu Shukla, you understand how an airline really operates, what happens at the airport when passengers arrive before the boarding. Do you think a person with special needs can be considered a disruptive passenger who can be denied boarding in this manner? You heard Manisha Gupta. She was there at the airport. She witnessed everything. And she told us that, the child was absolutely quiet.
Fortunate, and everybody would really be, I don't think anybody would take a contrary view to empathizing with the parents and the child in this situation. There is, however, an aircraft rule. It's Aircraft Rule 24A, which talks about mentally challenged passengers while they travel. The rule clearly states that if you're mentally challenged and if you have an episode or if you are troubled in some way, then there has to be sedatives which are carried for such passengers. When they say that you may be a danger, they don't just mean to the co-passengers. They also mean to themselves. We don't know how a person might react in air or what might happen in air. Unlike a car travel or a train travel, you can't stop and have somebody attend to you immediately. In case of an air travel, it causes a lot more issues than that. For example, if this leads, I believe the child was having a panic attack, the duration is about 10 minutes. We cannot predict whether he would have another episode in air. It would not be good for the child. It would not be good for the parents. It would definitely not be good for the co-passengers. More than anything for the child. I believe what the airline did, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is they put them up in a hotel and then they boarded them on the flight the next morning. Now, a mentally challenged passenger comes in a very different category from a disruptive passenger who may have consumed alcohol or somebody who's just generally difficult to deal with. Which is very different from Ms. Sudha Chandran's case. Ms. Sudha Chandran, I believe, faces issues at security check, which is handled by CISF. Yes. This was a ground staff issue. So there are multiple layers when you travel through air travel. And an air travel is not as simple as traveling by train. It has certain limitations because of the kind of travel that it is. If suddenly the child would have an attack in air, it would not be possible to land the aircraft immediately. They would need to find a suitable airport or an airport close by to land. There's a lot of logistics that are involved, whether the airline had ground support or not. I think they just erred on the side of caution. Which is the call that most airlines would take. I think there's a very different view of this which is being taken because people saw the episode and saw the child calm down. But they wouldn't know whether the child would have another episode in air and whether there were sedatives which were being carried, whether there was a doctor's certificate which certified him fit to travel. It is really sad, and honestly, I don't imagine anybody would think otherwise for the parents. But unfortunately, air travel is such a thing. When Mr. Modi says everybody, even in a Hawaii chappal, can travel, I'm sure he doesn't mean by compromising airline safety for the person who's involved or for the co-passengers around. All your rights come with responsibilities and duties. So one of the responsibility for the ground staff is to ensure a safe flight. For the airline, it's to ensure a safe flight. And I think they did a decent job of it by putting them up at their expense through the night and boarding the child on the first flight in the morning. So according to me, it comes under Aircraft Rule 24A, which has very clear guidelines on dealing with mentally challenged children or adults.
Well, you're right when you say that, you know, of course, rules are there and they need to be followed. But Sanat Kaul, is that what the rule says, that what we are seeing in the visuals? I mean, there is argument that's taking place. I mean, why did this manager not consult the doctor of the airport to check if this child is fit to fly or not?
Was there a doctor present
why
at the airport?
Why on earth did he suddenly decide that he and the family won't be allowed to board the aircraft?
Well, I think there's a lot of...
Okay, there is no doctor at night. So if there is some problem at the airport with any passengers at night, where should those people go? Mr. Sanat Kaul, then Sudha Chandran, then Manisha Gupta. Yes.
I'm not saying there was a doctor or not. I'm just asking whether there was a doctor.
So I just want to come in here, sorry, and I'm just coming in. But, you know,
Manisha, 1 second. Let Mr. Sanat Kaul respond. I'll come to you.
It is, as
Mr.
pointed
Kaul,
out by Neetu Shukla ji, that there is a rule of 24A, which I had forgotten, which can, you know, they have to, it's a discretion at that time, whether there was a doctor or not, whether they were carrying a report card, I don't know. So there is some justification at the local level, because if a passenger becomes sick or this thing, how does the airline manage? Yes, there were some doctors who were also flying, it seems, who said we will help.
Exactly.
Maybe, but I am not very clear that that is enough. The discretion of the manager there is, he must have given something in writing to his bosses why he did not allow the passenger to go. So these are issues in which there can be a lot of emotionalism, and it is very unfortunate. But it has to be seen with a more mature angle, that what was the thing which was facing Indigo, that they took a decision not to allow boarding. They put them up in a hotel and then allowed them to go. We need to know all that before we take a decision on this subject. But But as I said,
Sudha Chandran wants to come in. In the visuals, we can't see compassion, which the airline should have shown.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. Exactly. See, my point is, if there is a rule, then why are the passengers not informed of it beforehand? See, when you are issuing a boarding card, and you are, like you rightly said, there is a human side to the whole thing. See, the manager could have been a little more compassionate. He could have been a little more compassionate. But why this ruckus?
Ignorance of rule in the entire government structure is not an excuse. You're supposed to know all the rules. I don't know how you get to know all the rules, but you should know.
No, I know. I do accept the fact. I do accept it. But see, when we are booking our tickets, please inform the family that this is the rule. In case something like this happens, be prepared for it. Like when I travel, I always carry my medical certificate because I've been informed by the Jaipur Food Center. I have the entire medical documents with me. So in case anybody interrogates, then I have these documents to support it. So obviously the family must have carried it with them. Since
Absolutely.
the child has been, yes, and the child is a frequent flyer. It's not that he's flying for the first time.
Right. I just want to come in here.
And Manisha, if I'm not wrong, this happened just before the boarding. So it means the security check had already happened. The check-in of baggage had already happened.
Absolutely. So, you know what really happened, to respond to some of the points that have been raised here. These were very rule-abiding people. They have traveled, and I believe the CEO of Indigo in an interview earlier today has said that this parent and child have traveled not once but more than 20-30 times over Indigo, right? So they won't be unaware of the rules. I clearly saw, as did many people, that they were carrying medicines. The doctors who were co-passengers asked the manager, why don't you call the doctor from the airport? Why don't you call the airport doctor to certify? Are we really talking about a child who was mentally challenged? I mean, what are those definitions? Are we just assuming this child was mentally challenged? Right? It's a very broad spectrum that you're talking about, right? And also, when we kept on, I am sure that there are rules, but I'm sure an airline, as a gentleman said, what is the culture? What is the culture? What is the behaviors and practice of inclusion, of respect, of giving, of dignifying your passengers, with which you go and actually enforce those rules? Madam, I was there, and at no point of time did the manager take the family to a quiet corner, explain to them what the issue was, and assure them that they would be allowed to take the next flight, give them the santwana, right? Give them the assurance, give them the dignity that they would post them up, at the hotel. None of that happened. Here was what we really saw was power imbalance. There can be rules, but there is a certain in the service sector, right? You can't be lashing out rules like you were the beholder of overall power and authority. And that was the humiliation that we all experienced. And it wasn't just what, the parents experienced. We asked that manager, that assistant manager, call the manager. He said he did not. We said, can you at least confer once with the captain? He did not. So what is the decision-making process? What is the mechanism through which these rules are taken? Or can any ground staff, what is the process of escalation? Right. So,
yes, those are valid points. And Manisha, Mirror Now also formally asked Indigo for an interview with Mr. Datta to explain Indigo's side of the story. But our request was declined. And Captain Amit Singh, I want to ask you, is a manager in a situation like this the best arbiter for deciding a medical issue? Isn't he supposed to contact a doctor at the airport? And if there is a delegation of doctors in this particular flight traveling who are also asking the manager there to go and consult the doctor, why did he decide this on his own?
Like I said in the beginning, I'm not sure about the kind of disability, but the regulation is very clear that when the person arrives at the airport, it is the airline's responsibility to ensure seamless travel and provide all kind of assistance to the person. Now, if at the time of check-in, the people or the manager had a look, they ought to have a look when somebody checks in and they already have assigned while purchasing a ticket that there is a issue with the person with the mobility or whatever disability, then it is incumbent upon the airline to have a look and ask for any assistance if required. So that was not done. Had it been done, this issue would not have snowballed into a big issue. It would have been handled at that time. That is a doctor required? Is a child panicking? So it would have been addressed there. Let's call a doctor. Let's let the doctor decide. Are they carrying a medical certificate? Now, the Rule 24, which is being quoted, is about mental disorders and epilepsy. So I don't know if this was exactly relevant here or applicable in this case. So we should not jump to conclusions. And even if Rule 24 is applicable, then there are provisions. So no rule basically debars a person unless there is an issue of safety or security. Clearly, there was none here. There were doctors on board. Any registered medical practitioner can give a certificate. Need not be any specialist. So there were doctors on board who were vouching. There were passengers who were saying that we are not being inconvenienced. So there is an issue. Rule 24 talks about safety of the aircraft and the occupants. So Rule 24 clearly is not applicable here, or could have been basically facilitated. The whole purpose of making regulation is to facilitate travel, not to make things difficult or inconvenient for people.
Quite
so that is where the regulation comes from. You have to look at the source. The person, the manager, is basically looking at the person in front of him, and basically he is not able to take a call. He's always, if you can see the visuals, he is talking to somebody. So the scene, what he's describing, it is like Chinese whispers. You never know what kind of scene he has described to his managers, who for some reason have decided not to come to the scene. So it is said that service industry has to bend backwards to please the customer. We are in a service industry, the airline per se. So they have to understand that culture, service culture, is basically to help people travel. So it is not a benevolence or a benevolent thing that an electric wheelchair, to be precise, has been offered to purchase. So it has not been given. They have offered. And as per regulations, denied travel, they have to be given everything in writing, and they have to put them up in a hotel. So it is again not out of benevolence that they have to do. It is from the regulation point of view. So the airline has defaulted from the beginning, from the step one.
Absolutely. The Indigo manager behaved like a doctor, judge and jury all together. Neetu Shukla, will a manager of any airline for that matter dare to declare the kin of an MP or a minister arbitrarily as disruptive, the way in this case this child with special needs was suddenly declared as a threat to other passengers' safety? Are people with special needs considered threat to other passengers' safety by airlines?
Not talking about this particular case because we do not have all the details like we've just discussed. We don't know whether the child was mentally disabled. We don't know what was the chain of authority that was followed for the manager to take the call. There has been a debate about whether or not he spoke to people. He should have ideally consulted a doctor at the airport. That was clearly not done, which is a big no-no for the airline. But according to the head of Indigo and the parents, the child is a frequent traveler. He's traveled earlier, which means it's not that the airline denies boarding to the child every time. It's only because of the episode that the child had before the flight that this call was probably taken in terms of his safety. We still do not have the details. Like, I'm hearing everybody talk and everybody is talking on suppositions and we're talking on emotions. Rule 24A, like the gentleman was saying, clearly talks about mentally disabled people. So if we don't know whether or not the child was, that we can't really have this debate without all the facts. So keeping the facts in mind, if the child was allowed to travel earlier, obviously the airline did not have anything against such people traveling. And being in aviation for 19 years, I've seen a lot of mentally challenged people travel, and by and large, they're absolutely okay. But like I said, because it could probably endanger the safety of the child itself, the airline may have taken a call to not allow the child to fly. This entire debate, like I'm saying, is on suppositions. Until we don't have the clear facts, we're talking on emotions, either based with facts or knowledge of what happens in an aircraft. Because in an aircraft, at the end of the day, it would be the crew who would have to handle the child. And the doctors, which were fortunately there. In this case, we don't know whether or not they had sedatives, because the rule also states that such children would need.
So let's ask Manisha, because she was present there. She was present at the airport when this entire incident took place. Manisha, was a doctor consulted? Did a doctor come and examine the child?
No, in fact, there was a doctor who said, I am ready to certify. Let me certify. I am giving
Okay. Okay, I think there's some problem with the connection out there. We'll try and reconnect. But Mr. Sanat Kaul, if there was a doctor who was ready to certify, there was a delegation of doctors, we are being told, were also traveling in this particular flight, then why, would the airline's manager on his own decide to not allow this child to board the flight?
You see, I fully agree with you. And even when they on flight, if there's a heart attack or something, they call out and seek a doctor who may be traveling as a passenger, and he is requested to help out the passenger in trouble.
Absolutely.
So in this way, the calling of a doctor present there was fully justified. They should have requested him to certify, to have a look, to decide, and to give recommendations. This was not done.
Okay. Manisha is back with us. Yes, Manisha, you were telling us that the doctor who was also traveling as part of a delegation in this particular flight was ready to give some sort of a certification?
Yes, he was. And he assured the manager that he and other doctors were going to travel with this child. The response of the manager was that he could not allow the child to travel, not for his own safety, but because he was a risk to other passengers. And when I asked him to explain to me what that meant, he said behavior such as this and that of other drunkard passengers are a risk.
That's shocking.
Yes.
Captain, behavior such as this and those of drunkard passengers, can somebody with special needs be put in the same category as those of unruly passengers? It's shocking.
This was what the communication was. So it's all very good, right? If they had said it
Captain
is a
Amit Singh.
So if we talk about unruly passengers, we are going into an entirely different area. It is unruly passengers.
No, here I'm trying to understand from you, Captain Amit Singh, as Manisha was telling us, why was this child denied boarding? Because he was considered a safety risk. He was considered a threat to other passengers' safety. And the kind of information that Manisha is providing us seems to suggest that, he was considered just like any other disruptive passenger who we, normally call as unruly passenger in aviation terms. Can a passenger with special needs be considered an unruly passenger is what I'm trying to understand.
Certainly not. Let me explain. Unruly passenger is basically under the Tokyo Convention, wherein offenses are committed on board an aircraft. It relates to hijacking and other like physically abusive passengers, those kinds. So you're going into an entirely different realm, different extreme. And this teenager is kind of, you cannot imagine a person doing an unsafe act on board. It can be an anxiety attack. Anybody could have. There are people who are suffering depression who are traveling people with hypertension who are traveling, people who take pills for blood pressure, they're traveling. Anybody could go off the handle. So aviation works on probability of occurrence. So it is about the risk you are planning to take. Aviation there is nothing called zero risk. So there is certain amount of risk in aviation. Here, the regulation controls it. That if you have a doctor who is willing to certify, then the risk is controlled automatically. That is how you look at it from the safety point of view. Clearly, the safety angle is not conveyed to the manager, or the training is deficient. So the service standards and training of the personnel, their knowledge of the regulation and the safety culture in the organization, that is to be questioned rather than pinning the blame on one person as the manager. But it is about the organization's culture. We cannot take it to, it is like the sedation charges being put on people. So you cannot stand up
Absolutely.
one fine day and on a 12-year-old, you can file a FIR for breaking somebody's glass. It is equivalent to that. So if people are willing to vouch,
bracketing a child with special needs with drunkards, this is disgusting. Even if the manager there thought that, the child can't travel at that point in time, he could have shown a bit of compassion instead of bracketing him with drunkards and trying to suggest that, he's a threat like unruly passengers for their safety. Could you unmute yourself? Okay. I don't think I'm able to hear Neetu. Mr. Sanat Kaul, I want to give you the last word. You heard Manisha, who was present there, and I am shocked to hear what she told us. This child was bracketed, with drunkards, a child with special needs. I mean, this is the least that somebody in the services sector can really do with air travelers. Is this what we are planning to achieve, or we do not want passengers with special needs to travel at all by air?
No, I don't think it's that. It's a question of local manager not being sensitive enough to the situation. He obviously, maybe he was in a big hurry because there were a lot of people to be boarded, but he has to take care of passengers, and he cannot consider a child like that as a disruptive passenger or a threat to other passengers when doctors present there and others are saying that no, he's okay, we'll take care of him. So I think it's a question of poor discretion and no empathy, indifference, too many passengers coming in. So I think it's a localized problem which IndiGo has to sort out, and whatever penalties have to be put on IndiGo will, of course, will be decided by the government if they can do something under the law.
Absolutely, and this is a compassion versus commerce battle. We can really hope. Yes.
In Europe they have.
And we can really hope that this time. Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, I was saying that the development of rules and regulations with regard to passenger rights are more developed in other countries, especially in the EU sector, European Union sector. They are very developed. I've had experience. But in India, they're coming up, they're still coming up. But I think there is a need to take action, to have ruling on this subject for future. Whatever has happened, they have to investigate. But for future, this should not get repeated again. That is what I want to say.
Well, absolutely. And we can really hope that this time action will be taken against those people who are responsible, and these will not be mere words that we have heard from DGCA and from Minister of Civil Aviation. We can really hope that this does not happen again. I appreciate all of you. Thank you very much for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now this evening. We'll be tracking this very, very closely. Heading into a very short break, another important update lined up for you. A new twist in the sedition law debate. That's coming up for you on the other side. Stay with us.